Good evening, London. Allow me first to apologize for this.
The emergency channel!
I do, like many of you, appreciate the comforts of the everyday routine, the security of the familiar, the tranquility and repetition.
Bloody hell.
I enjoy them as much as any bloke. But in the spirit of commemoration,
Who's that, Mum?
whereby those important events of the past, usually associated with someone's death or the end of some awful bloody struggle, are celebrated with a nice holiday, I thought we could mark this November the 5th, a day that is sadly no longer remembered, by taking some time out of our daily lives to sit down and have a little chat. There are, of course, those who do not want us to speak.
Let me think, just let
I
me think.
suspect even now, orders are being shouted into telephones, and men with guns will soon be on their way.
It's Chancellor Sutler.
Damn it!
Why? Because while the truncheon may be used in lieu of conversation, words will always retain their power. Words offer the means to meaning, and for those who will listen, the enunciation of truth. And the truth is, there is something terribly wrong with this country, isn't there?
You designed it, sir. You wanted it foolproof. You told me every television in London.
Cruelty and injustice, intolerance and oppression. And where once you had the freedom to object, to think and speak as you saw fit, you now have censors and systems of surveillance coercing your conformity and soliciting
Cameras.
your submission.
We need cameras.
How did this happen? Who's to blame? Well, certainly there are those who are more responsible than others, and they will be held accountable. But again, truth be told, if you're looking for the guilty, you need only look into a mirror. I know why you did it. I know you were afraid. Who wouldn't be? War, terror, disease. There were a myriad of problems which conspired to corrupt your reason and rob you of your common sense. Fear got the best of you, and in your panic you turned to the now High Chancellor Adam Sutler. He promised you order, he promised you peace, and all he demanded in return was your silent, obedient consent.
Inspector, you're almost through.
Last night, I sought to end that silence. Last night, I destroyed the Old Bailey to remind this country of what it has forgotten. More than 400 years ago, a great citizen wished to embed the 5th of November forever in our memory. His hope was to remind the world that fairness, justice, and freedom are more than words. They are perspectives. So if you've seen nothing, if the crimes of this government remain unknown to you, then I would suggest that you allow the 5th of November to pass unmarked. But if you see what I see, if you feel as I feel, and if you would seek as I seek, then I ask you to stand beside me 1 year from tonight, outside the gates of Parliament, and together we shall give them a 5th of November that shall never, ever be forgotten.
And that was the big speech from the movie V for Vendetta, with the main character wearing the Charles II mask, and of course talking about how he's going to blow up the Houses of Parliament on the 5th of November. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to the Booms and Bust podcast. My name is Jonathan Davis, and indeed, today is the 5th of November. Remember the 5th of November, 2018. If the Houses of Parliament in London, in Westminster, do get blown up today, can I please have you guys as an alibi that I was here? It weren't me, Governor, in other words. Although, just like you, I am sure that we would all love to see some of the people who earn taxpayers' money, earn is not exactly the right word, take taxpayers' money, in the Palace of Westminster, and of course what they do with it. This is the Booms and Bust Show. By the way, if you haven't seen V for Vendetta, you must watch it. If you're listening to this show, you absolutely need to see that film. It's pretty good, and it's highly believable in the sense, and he alludes to it in his speech. There were I don't want to give the game away if you haven't seen that film, but in essence, there was a disaster or a series of disasters. And this hard nut came along and said, hey, you give me absolute power and there will never be another election, then I'll look after you. And of course, the people were afraid and they gave it. Well, you know, that's entirely believable. That could easily happen in the 21st century. What with all the technology and the bioweapons and you know what. Okay. So the Booms and Bust show is about free markets, libertarianism, capitalism, and so on, and we rip apart the idiocy of the mainstream media, of the lefty socialist elite that's in politics, in defence, in the media, in finance. I mean, it's just so ugly what these guys do to us. And of course, we let them get away with it. I mean, that's the most stupid thing about it. Can I say a very happy birthday to something that was created on this week in history? In fact, on the 29th of October, 1969, what is it that is 49 years old? Well, in a sense, you're listening to it. No, not me. The internet was created at CERN in Switzerland on the 29th of October 1969. A year from now, the internet will be 50 years old, and look how far it's come. So let's just catch up on a few bits of news, and then we will look at economics and markets in particular. Lots to talk about in markets. And the last show I did, of course, was 2 weeks ago, and a lot has happened in the 2 weeks. And I think you'd agree, if you're a regular listener, that much of what I've been saying over the months would happen, has happened. But, you know, we'll get back to that. So this is great. I love this story. The United Kingdom National Union of Students is in crisis and teetering on the verge of bankruptcy. An explosive letter obtained by some news website has revealed. In recent years, student union disaffiliation, that's university unions, along with other services that provide student discounts without the NUS baggage of dubious geopolitical stances, anti-Semitism scandals, and hatred of clapping, you remember that one, have put the organisation under serious strain. So much so that they're at £3 million in debt, and they're going to have to do job losses. In other words, austerity. We hate austerity, but now that we're growing up, because we understand a little bit more about money, because the banks are telling us they're going to take us apart because we are trustees of this organisation and personally liable, we now understand austerity. But, you know, we still hate austerity, and anyone doing austerity, it's absolutely disgusting, except when we do it. You get the point. Talking of which, we've had the budget since the last Booms and Bust podcast, and of course, it was, well, it was nothing. Apart from practically falling asleep. Well, let's face it, Philip Hammond, the Chancellor of the UK, is hardly Churchillian when he speaks. The thing to note about the budget is that he has quite simply confirmed that the so-called Conservative government will never pay down debt. They will always borrow more, which ultimately creates more and more inflation. And you know what the biggest tax of all, listener, is? Not the one that the Chancellor sets directly, but global markets basically do. Inflation is the biggest tax of all. And Theresa May and Philip Hammond have decided that we, the people of the United Kingdom, must have higher and higher inflation. And of course, they're borrowing money to buy votes with our money. This is the system. This is the socialists that run our country. The Liberal Democrats staff at the headquarters have been told that because of a £700,000 hole in their budget, the Liberal Democrats organisation will need to make 20 people redundant by the end of this month out of a staff of 80. It just keeps coming. Now, the Labour Party. The Metropolitan Police have launched a criminal investigation into allegations of anti-Semitism within Labour. The police have been examining an internal Labour document detailing allegations of anti-Semitism, which was obtained by a national news radio organisation. And the Met have concluded that several allegations within it were worthy of full criminal investigations. Now, the leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, said at the annual conference in September, that he would fight anti-Semitism in his party till his last heartbeat. And of course the crowd, the audience loved it. They lapped it up. Except of course when it involved handing over a Labour Party created document detailing alleged anti-Semitism and not handing it over to the authorities. You clearly have a lot of heartbeats still to go, don't you, Mr. Corbyn? So that was a roundup of some of the political organisations in the country. The last one I want to mention is the Conservatives. They are, of course, continuing to do what they need to do to keep us in the EU. The latest thing that was splashed all over the mainstream media over the weekend is that the whole of the United Kingdom, wonderfully, they said, is going to be in the customs union when we Brexit. Very few people made the obvious comment that you don't Brexit when you're in the customs union. It is quite frightening. Tomorrow, Tuesday, the 6th of November, May and her civil servant, lapdog, Ollie Robbins, which I presume means Oliver, or is it Olivier? I don't know, I don't really care. They're going to put it to the full cabinet, and of course it's going to be just like Chequers, a fait accompli, accept it or get hung out to dry. I guess there's going to be some kind of a revolt in Parliament. I guess we're probably heading to get rid of Theresa May and then probably just leave the EU without an agreement. That is in my dreams, but of course that's probably not how it's going to end up. It's probably going to be Brino Brexit in name only. Well, we'll see. I want to now read out to you a really disturbing announcement which has been subtitled. It was heard on a train in London. Okay, I'm going to read that to you because it's difficult for you to hear what she's saying. But this is an announcement on a high-speed passenger train, intercity passenger train in China. And as a guy said on Twitter, a real announcement I recorded, a guy called James O'Malley, on the Beijing to Shanghai bullet train. Are you ready for this? I just want to get rid of the volume and we'll play it. Okay, dear passengers, people who travel without a ticket or behave disorderly or smoke in public areas will be punished according to regulations, and the behaviour will be recorded in individual credit information system to avoid a negative record of personal credit. Please follow the relevant regulations and help with the orders on the train and at the station. Quite remarkable, really. Do you remember I've said in previous shows that in China now, everyone's got a social credit score, and if you do anything which is something they don't like, as for example I've just listed there, they'll downgrade your score such that 11 million people so far this year have been excluded from flying, from taking a high-speed train, or being able to obtain a public sector job. The future dystopia is here in 2018, and it will, I'm afraid, spread around the world. We need to look after ourselves individually, because no one's going to look after us for us. And this is very much what the Booms and Bust podcast is all about. Tell your friends to listen to the Booms and Busts podcasts, because they need to hear this stuff. You know they do. You know it makes sense. So Trump's an idiot, is he? So that's why just yesterday, Chinese President Xi Jinping announced that China will again lower tariffs further. And they're expecting China's imports of goods and services to exceed $40 trillion in the next 15 years. Because they're lowering the tariffs. Because Trump knows how to negotiate. And he's helping the world by dampening down on Chinese totally messing about and playing a game with us all. And be thankful for Trump. And let's just hope that we can cement that and we actually Brexit. So I see the living wage went up today, and of course that's being trumpeted all over the media. Isn't it absolutely fantastic? Isn't it wonderful? Don't they realise that if instead we had capitalism, we would have a stronger currency, lower import costs, and therefore lower costs of living, and therefore we would pay people less, but they'd have a higher standard of living. In deflation, we all do better, listener. All this does, increasing the living wage, all it does is boosts inflation further, which cements that in due course, not overnight, but in due course, the Bank of England socialists, Marxists, will have to raise interest rates. Okay, this is so funny. Mike Hussey, the chief executive of a property developer, Alma Cantor, has said that the company has decided to halt formal sales of flats in the 1960s brutalist tower at Centre Point. You know, at Tottenham Court Road in London. Just turn the page. Rather than slash prices because he can't sell many of his properties. The company said, usual rubbish, concerns about Brexit and possible tax increases on overseas investors were encouraging potential buyers to make offers well below the asking price. Get this. The decision to halt sales means about half of the tower's 82 flats, which range from £1.8 million for a one-bedroom apartment. This is even funnier. To £55 million for the two-storey, five-bedroom penthouse. They will now lie empty, adding to the glut of unsold ultra-luxury property across London. The chief executive added that because Alma Cantor had sold half of the apartments, cleared the debts run up by construction, and leased the retail space at the bottom of the tower, quote, "We see no point in chasing a market that is increasingly detached from reality." Actually, Mr. Hussey, you're the one who's detached from reality. You can't sell those stupid flats because the prices are beyond breathtakingly stupid. The chairman of the estate agent involved, he said, the company is a beautifully executed project that we believe will have enduring appeal in the market. They would be ready to try selling again next year when there was a clear runway ahead. Yeah, there'll be higher interest rates, and I can assure you, people will not be buying property in 2019. Right, now, slightly more interesting, I would suggest. Let's talk a little bit about technology. 3 things I want to mention, which are quite astounding, because, you know, in the Booms and Bust show, I try to talk about what's happening out there that might have it might help you to come to decisions about where to put your investment money for your long-term retirement planning. I would just say there's no advice given here. Any decisions you make are entirely on you. All I'm doing is giving ideas, and then it's up to you to do with it what you will. China has been for the last 10 years in development of what they call a solar highway. This solar highway has a continuous solar panel that as you drive along it, it will charge your electric car. Now, they've already built 2 miles of this thing, and okay, it's cost them millions, fine, but they are way ahead of everyone in the world. In fact, their target within 11 years, 2030 in other words, is that all cars in China, 10% of them, I beg your pardon, will be electric. And they will very likely achieve that because already some months they are achieving 5% of all new cars are electric. So yes, they'll get to 10%, I'm sure, no doubt, by about a decade or so from now. So it's an amazing, you can go and Google it. I think it was on Bloomberg. You can go and Google it, the solar highway. It's absolutely incredible. What's next? Also in China. At ABB's new $150 million factory, they have built robots to build robots. If anyone has seen the Terminator movies, might I suggest that everyone goes long Skynet. Then over to this country, the automated flying is becoming a reality. Electric flying is becoming a reality. The chief executive of EasyJet says that they plan to test a 9-seater electric plane in 2019. It seems to me that over the next 10 years, we're going to see more change in our society than we have seen since the internet got going about 25 years ago. It's all just speeding up, listener. We've had elections in South America. We've now got Macri in Argentina, Bolsonaro in Brazil, Lopez Obrador in Mexico, all conservative leaders. Of course, the mainstream media absolutely hates them, which of course is incredibly pathetic. They call them fascists and so on. This is not a joke. Anyone to the right of Karl Marx is a fascist. Astonishing. I noticed in the recent Brazilian presidential election, which elected Bolsonaro, I noticed that WhatsApp, which of course is Zuckerberg's Facebook's control, they banned 100,000 conservative accounts prior to the election. That isn't just pathetic. That is scary where we're heading. And tomorrow is a big day in global politics because we've got the US midterm elections. It seems to me when I look at, you just have to see the crowds that go to look and view what Trump's got to say. I mean, the guy is a rock star. It's like Obama 10 years ago. He is absolutely filling stadiums. He's jam-packing them. 20, 40, 50,000 people are turning out to see Donald Trump wearing red MAGA caps. It is a sight to behold. And of course, the media only focuses on as a close-up of his face and the half a dozen people behind him. If instead, and we've seen it a couple of times, but normally not, if the camera would pan out and then go out and see there's no way they're showing that in the mainstream media. It is astonishing. So it seems to me, just based on that and seeing the very small numbers that are turning out for the Democrat leadership, it seems to me, as I've said a few weeks ago, the Republicans should do well in the midterms when, as you know, in the middle of a parliament, the incumbent party normally does very badly. But I think they'll do very well. And that will speed up even more the changes that President Trump is bringing about. It's a fascinating statistic. One of the reasons why the US is absolutely split down the middle between the red and the blue. Incidentally, in America, the red are the right wing and the blue are the left wing. It's very weird because the red flag of communism and fascism and also of Nazism. It's very strange. But red is Republican and blue is Democrat. Very strange. There are about 3,000 counties in America, but half of the US population is clustered in 146 counties. So naturally, you only have to win, therefore, a small number of counties and you win national elections. That's one of the problems of US politics. Talking about US politics, I see that the Saudi Crown Prince has said that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia will completely change within 5 years. So I'm wondering, does that mean that they'll be more honest and transparent about their assassinations? Just me thinking out loud. I want to thank everyone who has retweeted the Booms and Bust podcast. And we're now doing 2 podcasts a month. We'll keep it at this level for now. We'll see how that goes. Someone said to me they're still having difficulty in obtaining the new podcasts. Well, it's the easiest thing in the world. Either simply go on to the Booms Bust Show Twitter account, and it's the pinned tweet. As soon as I publish a new podcast, I pin it to the Booms Busts Show Twitter account. So either you do that, you just click and listen, or go on to audioboom.com, click on listen, search for Booms, and there it is. And doing either of those things, and you will listen to it whenever you just do those clicks. If you want to be sent the new podcast, then try Podcast Addict, subscribe to the podcast, and it will be sent to your inbox whenever a new podcast is published. Isn't it interesting? I'm reading that from Cupertino to San Francisco in Southern California, a growing consensus has emerged that computer and mobile and tablet screen time is bad for children. Parents in Southern California, bear in mind, that's where you've got all the big tech companies. Well, okay, I admit Amazon and Microsoft are in the Northwest, but other than that, they're all in Southern California. The parents there are now asking nannies to keep phones, tablets, computers, and TVs off and hidden at all times. Some are even producing no phone contracts, which guarantee zero unauthorized screen exposure for new nannies to sign. Do you seriously believe that multi-billionaires who have created all this tech stuff, do you seriously believe that if it was good for their kids, they would let their kids onto the tablets? No, they know best. So, a lot to think about there, listener. I've been talking recently about cannabis, and this is absolutely amazing. 2 researchers from the National Institutes of Health wrote in a 2013 study, 5 years ago, which was published in the Journal of the Federation of European Biochemical Societies. Cannabinoids, which in other words are medicines from cannabis, quote, may have therapeutic potential in almost all diseases affecting humans, unquote. In the Journal of the Federation of European Biochemical Societies, 5 years ago, cannabinoids may have therapeutic potential in almost all diseases affecting humans. If there isn't an investment opportunity there, I'm a monkey's uncle. After 33 minutes, let us move to economics and then markets. So, which country? There's a little quiz question for you, Trivial Pursuit. Which country is the biggest producer of oil now in the world? No, it's not Saudi Arabia. It's not Russia. So you're thinking, my God, who is it then? Is it Brazil? Australia? No. If you said the United States, you're a winner. United States of America is the biggest producer of oil in the world. And it's very likely to stay that way for quite some time now. So they're producing vast amounts of oil, vast amounts of natural gas. They're also, in due course, they're going to be building up their nuclear power generation. It's very important to them to be self-sufficient in energy, and rightly so. The good news is that the ex-governor of Texas is actually the U.S. Energy Secretary, and I got great news for you uranium mining investors. He is a lover of uranium and nuclear power. Rubbing his hands with glee, says JD. Right. So the headline was Synchronized Global Slowdown, because they pushed out the JP Morgan Global Manufacturing Purchasing Manager industry survey, and it showed that whereas in December last year the index was at 55, now it's at 52.2. To which you say, oh, gosh, it's recessionary, we're going down. No, because as I've said many times, above 50 is expansionary, below 50 is contractionary. The headline was synchronized global slowdown. No, the reality is global manufacturing still expanding. Above 50 is expansionary. From the Bank of America, the headline, warning, 14 out of 19 bear market signals triggered. Now listen to this. In the body of the article, bearing in mind that was the headline, in the body of the article, pushed several paragraphs down, the Bank of America found that it has taken the S&P 500 21 months on average to peak when a similar percentage of signposts were toppled. What was the headline again? 14 out of 19 bear market signals triggered, Bank of America says. The mainstream media is not there to educate you, listener. The MSM is there to sell whatever it needs to sell. It's not there to educate, or indeed, certainly not to make you money. So what do we actually see? We see that 90% of the S&P 500 companies have beaten analyst earnings expectations. And this is like the biggest in decades, 90%. To which you say, well, maybe it's peaking. Well, maybe it is. But when you get more than like 60% beating analysts' expectations, you've very likely got a stocks bull market, and we're still at 90%. US unemployment rate is the lowest level since just after the internet was invented. December 1969, the internet, I said earlier, October 69. Next year, they say the US is going to grow 3.5%. The largest economy on the planet is going to grow 3.5%. And they tell you we're close to a recession. Will you please stop listening to the doom and gloomsters? Stop buying their bloomin' newsletters, their journals, their magazines. Stop it. It's not helping you. The CNN has what they call a fear and greed index. So if they're like above 90%, then great, they're being greedy. Everyone's all in stocks. You should be selling or no longer buying until we get a pullback. The fear and greed index is at 5%. It's massively fearful. Yes, it can go to 1%. The stock market is bottoming here or close to here. The Federal Reserve apparently has got one more hike this year and 3 more to do in 2019. Well, I'm not sure it will actually do the one in December. The market needs to be saying it's above 80% sure, and the market's hovering around 80%. Now, the last increases in the rate, I have told you repeatedly, these will happen, and they did. Here we are, 5th of November. The next Federal Open Markets Committee meeting is to announce on the 19th of December, about 6 weeks from now. At this point in time, I am not sure that we will see that interest rate hike. I'll tell you what, if it doesn't happen, or if the market believes it will not happen, you will see the dollar fall markedly, and that will be great for emerging markets, commodities, gold, etc. Do you know that the Dow Jones actually turns out to be quite a nice economics indicator? It's rare to see a recession after the Dow Jones gets to a new high. And this goes back to 1950, this data. We got a new all-time high in September, late September. 6 months later, the percent of time that the US has been in recession, 0.8%. 12 months after a new all-time high, and the US has been in recession 2.2% of the time. And all periods of time, full stop, after the Dow Jones gets a new all-time high, the US is in recession 13% of the time. In other words, it's pretty darn rare to see a recession within 12 or 18 months. We can reasonably deduce that from a new all-time high in the stock market. So we could be looking at a recession the end of next year. At best, in that scenario, what we're talking about is a final peak in the stock market. Am I calling for that? No, but it's possible. Going to markets, I want to talk about our best friends, uranium and uranium miners. Uranium, listener, get this. The price of uranium. Remember, I've been telling you over the weeks and months and years even now about the supply-demand disequilibrium that is upon us in the uranium world. And unsurprisingly, admittedly from a very long-term low price at the end of 2016, uranium has now hit a 2.5-year high. Uranium at the end of 2016 was $18 a pound. It's now $29 a pound. What's that? That's about a 55% increase. Do you know what? We were at $56 a pound back in 2014. I say to you that we will take out $56 by 2020, maybe even 2019, but I'm saying to you by 2020, I'm saying to you that uranium will have at least 100% rise over the next 2 years, within 2 years, and if that happens, then some of the uranium miners that I'm looking at will go up 200 to 300%. And we still won't see the peak of all peaks that we're going to see 3 to 6 years from now. If you want to hear that, understand what I said, just go back and listen again. That's what's great about podcasts. If something catches your ear, you just go back and listen again. I've talked about the Greek market in the past. Do you know, out of the top sort of 30 stock markets in the world, Greece is the cheapest by far. It has a price-earnings ratio of only 2.9, the stock market to aggregate corporate profits. Stock market index to aggregate corporate profits. Compare that to the UK, which has a PE of 16.5. Compare that to what they expect next year. The UK is going to grow 1.4%. They expect Greece to grow 2.5%. Do you know, in the last year or so, we've had a near doubling in the amount of money that Chinese people have spent on Greek property. Chinese money is going into Greece like Billy O. Chinese money, wake up to the opportunity. And if you look over at the US markets, currently, with this 10 or so % fall in US stocks from the end of September to a few days ago, to last week, we have the lowest forward price earnings multiple for the S&P 500 since early 2016. And we've had a flat year for stocks this year, yet we've seen earnings per share growth of 20%. So of course, if the E in PE rises, but the P is static, well, of course, the ratio, the multiple is going to go down. Obviously, it's simple arithmetic. And you know, in early 2016, when we also had a low forward PE multiple, that was the setting for 2 years of really fantastic stock market performance. Now, when I look at the global stock market, and I look at the last, I'm looking at the VEU, which is the Vanguard FTSE All World ex-US ETF. It goes back to 2007, and the index at 2007 got up to 46. It did it again 46 in 2014. It did it again 46 in 2015, and it broke through in 2017 up to 57, and look where it was at the end of October, towards the end of October, back to 46. Go and have a look at that chart. And it seems to me that 46 is a huge support level which was resistance. And if it bounces from here and stays above 46, this is ex-US, we have just seen the biggest retest of a breakout in history. And if you look at the global market, the IWDA.L, including the US, it also broke out in 2017. That support broken out to that resistance broken out in 17. They also tried to break through, stretching back to 1999. It's arguably, or should I say, it's probably, because we have to go with the weight of evidence, it's probably the biggest retest of a breakout in history. Now, sure, it could go back below the support, and then that support would then automatically become resistance all over again, and it's a failed breakout. And from failed moves come fast moves in the other direction. But if that support holds, well, we've just seen practically 2 decades of resistance. We're probably going to see practically 2 decades of a strong stock market. Now, in the very short term, the US market is still in something of a downtrend since the end of September. But I'm thinking that tomorrow's elections are going to be a catalyst for the resumption of the bull market, very similar to the catalysts of the Brexit referendum and indeed the presidential election in November 16. That's what I'm thinking is going to happen. We shall see whether or not that actually does happen. Let me give you some stock market historical facts. During a year when you have the midterm elections, because they don't happen every 4 years and all that kind of stuff, the S&P 500 has been higher from whatever October lows they saw until the end of the year. Since World War II, you've had 18 midterm election years, and that stock market movement has happened 18 times. Now, as of the 1st of November, which was, of course, Thursday there, they had 3 consecutive days with at least 1% rises of the S&P 500. The only 4 other times that's happened is February 16, the beginning of the current bull market, June 16, Brexit, going back to October 11, which was after the a major hiccup in stock markets, where they had a problem with the computer-driven stocks, and May 2009, 6 weeks after the bottom of one of the biggest collapses in history. 3 consecutive 1% days. It's looking good. I have said again and again that the fall in February this year and the fall in October this year, it is most likely 2018 is merely a consolidation year before we go to the moon over the next 10, 20 years. But we'll see. Anything can possibly happen. Absolutely anything. I see that market breadth is down below the lows of February 2018. That's bullish. And indeed, market breadth is back to where it was at the end of a bear market in February 2016. But this time, it's only taken a month or so, whereas that time, it was a year and a half from the second half of 2014. We also see that we have the fewest stocks in the S&P 500 above their 200-day moving average since February 2016. Clearly, everyone's already sold. Everyone's negative. Everyone's doom and gloom. When you see market statistics like these, you have to be buying. Technically, the market is still in a short-term downtrend, but it's 10% below where it was a month and a half ago. And 10%, the prices are on sale. If you saw 10% off in the local store, you'd at least walk in to have a look, wouldn't you? We're talking about long-term investing here. And although it's 10% overall, some stocks are down 20 or 30%. Since 1950, there have been 8 years when the S&P 500 was positive by the end of September for the year to date. And then it turned negative year to date during October. In other words, the fall was so sharp that whatever money was made in the first 9 months was entirely negated, and some during October. Well, in November and December, on 6 of those occasions, the S&P 500 ended the year up more than 4%. And if that is repeated in November and December of this year, we could be looking at 15% in just these 2 months. And everyone's doom and gloom. Well, we'll see what actually happens. On the bearish side, here is an interesting statistic, without a question. Number of days with 2% plus falls in the S&P 500. In 2004, 2005, 2006, and 2017, 0. So in those 4 years, not a single day was a 2% plus faller. In 2012, it was 3 days. 2013, it was 2 days. In 2014, it was 4 days. In 2015, it was 6 days. 2016, it was 5 days. So, sub 10 in those half a dozen years. Now, here's interesting. In 2007, which was the year before the almighty crash, they had 11 days with 2% plus falls. And then in the crash of 2008, unsurprisingly, had 41 days. And then in 2009, as the market was still falling and then stabilizing, in 2009, they had 28 such days. In 2010, 10 such days. In 2011, 21 days. Now focus on 2011, the year before the crash. 11 days were 2% plus fallers. So far this year, we've had 10 such days. Now it's true, that's pretty close to the 11 2007. That is indicative that next year could be a 2008. Well, it's not very strong indication, but let's just bear any possibility in mind. Quick comment about emerging markets. On the very, very big picture, the monthly chart, the monthly stochastics are under 20. And let me tell you that over the last 20 odd years, a stochastic under 20 on the monthly has signaled a significant multi-year long-term trend reversal. And indeed, short-term emerging markets relative to the S&P are strongly up. In emerging markets, we see that Chinese railway freight year on year is strongly up at about 10%. This is indicative of a strong economy. Gold, well, $12.60 an ounce is still in play, above and holding, and you're looking at the high 1300s, and in that, junior gold miners could go up 30 to 50%. Above 1400, you're looking at the 1500s, and then you're looking at another 1 to 200% on junior miners. I haven't got time to talk about anything else, so we'll go on to quotes and such like. Bertrand Russell said, 5th of November, he didn't say it on the 5th of November, as soon as we abandon our reason and are content to rely on authority, there is no end to our troubles. Warren Buffett said a very smart thing as to why asset bubbles happen. People see neighbours dumber than they are getting rich. The fear of missing out is very, very powerful. What's the next thing I want to say? Particularly when you think about Venezuela, the Democrats, the UK Labour Party, Macron, the EU, Merkel, etc. Listen to this. Communism. Commissars take your stuff and give it to other people. If you resist, the government arrests you. Socialism. Bureaucrats take your stuff and give it to other people. If you resist, the government arrests you. Democratic socialism. 51% of the voters take your stuff and give it to other people. If you resist, the government arrests you. On that note, I'll see you again. I've had an absolute blast.